When Keanu Reeves walks onto the set of Voices in Debate, the audience expects another deep and introspective conversation. But host James Holloway has a different plan. Known for his aggressive style and sharp provocations, he's here to challenge, not to reflect. The moment he notices Keanu's silver cross necklace, he sees an opening, an opportunity to dissect, to question, to break down a belief. He leans in, ready to strike. But as Keanu takes his seat, something shifts. The usual power dynamic feels off. Holloway may think he's in control, but by the end of this interview, it won't be Keanu struggling for words. It will be him. And the world will be watching. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special one for you. The studio pulsed with energy. Bright lights bathed the sleek modern stage, where LED panels shimmered in hues of blue and gold, embodying the show's refined aesthetic. A low murmur spread through the audience, their anticipation growing with every passing second. Voices in Debate was no ordinary talk show. It thrived on sharp discourse, helmed by a host whose relentless questioning made him both captivating and formidable. At the heart of the stage, James Holloway adjusted his tie, his lips curving into a knowing smile. Tall and composed, with precisely styled silver hair and piercing eyes, he was a master of provocation. His forte lay in dismantling facades, pushing guests to confront truths they might rather keep concealed. As the show's signature theme swelled through the speakers, applause rippled across the studio. The cameras homed in on Holloway as he spread his arms in a polished, theatrical motion. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Voices in Debate. His voice, rich with confidence, filled the space effortlessly. The show where we challenge ideas, deconstruct narratives, and put great minds to the test. The audience responded with thunderous applause. Every week, Voices in Debate welcomed influential figures, politicians, intellectuals, and celebrities, sparking discussions that often dominated headlines. But tonight's guest carried a significance unlike any before. He wasn't a controversial politician or a scandal-ridden celebrity. He was an icon, beloved, respected, yet wrapped in an air of mystery. Holloway let the suspense build before speaking again. Our guest tonight is one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. A legendary actor, admired for his humility and kindness, yet someone who remains intriguingly private. He rarely shares more than what is necessary. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But tonight, we aim to go beyond the surface. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves. The studio erupted in applause. Some audience members even rose to their feet in admiration. The camera shifted toward the side of the stage as a dark curtain slowly parted. Keanu stepped forward with his signature composed stride, carrying an effortless presence. Dressed in a sleek black suit without a tie, he exuded quiet confidence. His shoulder-length hair framed his face, and against the dark fabric of his attire, a silver cross necklace gleamed under the studio lights. He acknowledged the crowd with a reserved smile before taking his seat across from Holloway. Crossing his legs in a relaxed manner, he appeared completely unfazed by the weight of expectation in the room. "Keanu Reeves," Holloway said, leaning slightly forward, his gaze sharp and focused. "It's a pleasure to have you here." "The pleasure is mine, James," Keanu replied, his voice calm yet steady. The host studied him for a moment, like a chess player contemplating his opening move. "You have a reputation for being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood, an enigma. Always kind, always discreet, never caught in scandals. But honestly, Keanu, I believe there's much more to you than people realize." Keanu offered a small, knowing smile, tilting his head slightly. "I think we all have more layers than we show the world." "No doubt," Holloway agreed, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "And that's exactly what we're here to explore." A brief pause followed, calculated, deliberate. Then, Holloway's gaze flicked toward the silver cross resting against Keanu's chest. "Now tell me," he said, gesturing subtly toward the necklace. "You've never been particularly outspoken about religion or faith, yet here you are wearing a very visible Christian symbol." Keanu's expression remained calm, though his fingers instinctively brushed against the cross, an unconscious habit. The studio lights pulsed gently as the show returned from commercial break. The audience, still murmuring in anticipation, leaned forward, eager for what would come next. Behind them, the Voices in Debate logo glowed, a bold reminder of the show's reputation. James Holloway settled into his seat, a smug smile playing at his lips, his gaze sharp with the confidence of a man who believed he was in control. This was his moment. The part he thrived on. The moment he unraveled his guests, stripped away their defenses, and pushed them into uncomfortable territory. "All right, we're back," he announced, twirling a pen between his fingers with casual indifference. Then, his eyes locked onto Keanu Reeves, sharp and unrelenting, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Before the break, I asked you a simple question, Keanu," Holloway said, his voice smooth yet insistent. "What does that necklace mean to you?" The audience fell into silence. Some in the audience leaned forward, eager to see how Keanu would respond under pressure. His fingers brushed against the silver cross, rolling it gently between them. His expression remained calm, his demeanor unreadable. "This necklace," he said, glancing down as if carefully choosing his words, "has personal meaning to me." Holloway arched an eyebrow before letting out a short, scoffing laugh. "Personal?" he echoed mockingly. "Oh, come on, Keanu. You're a public figure. Everything you wear, everything you display, sends a message." Keanu stayed composed, but Holloway sensed the subtle tension beneath his stillness. The host leaned in slightly, his tone dripping with condescension. "And let's be real here," he gestured toward the cross. "It's 2025. The world has changed. People have changed." He pointed directly at the necklace. "And yet here you are, wearing an archaic symbol." The provocation was deliberate. The audience tensed, sensing the sharp edge in his words. Keanu's gaze remained steady. "Archaic?" Holloway smirked, pressing further. "Yes, archaic. Religion, faith, belief in unseen forces," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I'm not a religious man, Keanu," Holloway said, his voice laced with certainty. "I believe in reason, in progress. And frankly, I find it surprising that someone like you, modern, progressive, intelligent, would still cling to something so outdated." He chuckled softly, shaking his head as if addressing a child who hadn't yet outgrown fairy tales. "Look, I understand when simple-minded people, people without access to knowledge, hold on to faith. But you—" He raised a brow, his eyes gleaming with condescension. "You've traveled the world. You've seen different cultures. I expected better." It was an insult wrapped in intellectual superiority. Some in the audience let out nervous chuckles at Holloway's audacity, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Keanu? He didn't react. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't shrink beneath Holloway's words. Instead, he met the host's gaze with a quiet, unwavering intensity. And then, at last, he spoke. "Interesting, James." His voice was steady, carrying an undercurrent of quiet strength. "You talk as if faith and intelligence are mutually exclusive." Holloway scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. "Oh, come on, Keanu. Let's be honest here." He leaned forward, seizing the moment. "How many wars have been fought in the name of that cross you're wearing? How many people have been persecuted, killed, condemned because of that symbol?" Keanu ran his thumb over the pendant, his expression unmoved. Then, with measured calm, he responded, "Do you want to debate history, James? Or do you want to debate my necklace? The audience reacted instantly. A ripple of impressed murmurs spread through the crowd. Holloway's eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly. He forced a chuckle, but his fingers tensed subtly on the armrest of his chair. "Fair enough," he conceded. Holloway's tone sharpened. "Let's make it simpler, then. Are you wearing that cross as a statement? As a declaration to the world?" It was a trap. If Keanu said yes, Holloway could accuse him of pushing a religious agenda. If he said no, he'd appear hypocritical for displaying a symbol without standing by it. But once again, Keanu didn't take the bait. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, observing the host with quiet curiosity. Then he spoke. "Are you wearing that expensive watch on your wrist as a statement, James? As a declaration to the world?" Silence. A second too long. The audience erupted in laughter. Keanu had turned the conversation on its head with effortless precision. Holloway's jaw tensed, just for a moment. He was no stranger to heated debates. He had challenged politicians, intellectuals, and celebrities, always in control. But this was different. Keanu wasn't defensive. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't reacting with frustration or aggression. He was using Holloway's own tactics against him. And the audience was starting to catch on. The shift in energy was subtle but undeniable. But Holloway wasn't about to lose control. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound dangerous. "All right, Keanu. Let's be blunt. In a world of science, evolution, and technology, do you really believe that symbol on your chest still has a place?" The provocation was no longer veiled. It was a direct challenge. The audience held their breath. Keanu's lips parted, ready to respond. And then, the show's theme music played. A commercial break. Holloway grinned triumphantly and turned to the camera. "We'll be right back, folks. But trust me, this conversation is far from over." The studio lights shifted subtly as the show returned from the break, the familiar theme playing once more. James Holloway adjusted his tie, clasping his hands together with a smug smile. He believed he had backed Keanu into a corner. "And we're back, ladies and gentlemen." His voice carried the self-assuredness of a man convinced he had already won. He turned to the camera, holding his audience captive. "Before the break, we left a question in the air, one that I think we all want answered. In a world of science, technology, and evolution, does that symbol still have a place?" Holloway's eyes locked onto Keanu, sharp and expectant. He was waiting for hesitation, for uncertainty, for a moment of weakness. But Keanu Reeves did not hesitate. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his posture composed, his expression unreadable, except for the faintest glint in his eyes. "James, if you don't mind, may I ask you a question?" Holloway blinked, momentarily thrown by the sudden shift in dynamic. He recovered quickly, offering a grin laced with amusement and just a touch of mockery. "Oh, by all means," he said. Keanu studied him for a brief moment, then spoke. "What do you believe evolution is?" Holloway squinted slightly, as if trying to discern a trap. "Oh, come on, Keanu," he scoffed. "Evolution is progress. It's growth. It's about leaving behind outdated beliefs and advancing toward a world driven by reason." Keanu nodded slowly, as though weighing the response. "So to you, evolving means abandoning anything that can't be measured in a lab?" Holloway let out a dry chuckle, spreading his hands. "Well, if something can't be proven, then it's just an idea, right?" Keanu held Holloway's gaze, calm, patient, unshakable. "And love?" Holloway blinked. "What about love?" Keanu continued. "Can you measure love, James?" The audience murmured. A few people crossed their arms, intrigued by the shift in conversation. Holloway scoffed, but there was a subtle edge of unease in his demeanor now. "I'm not sure I follow." Keanu's voice remained steady. "Does love exist?" Holloway exhaled sharply. "Of course it does. But have you ever scientifically proven it?" Keanu asked. "Have you ever held love in your hands? Placed it under a microscope?" The silence in the studio was absolute. For the briefest moment, Holloway's expression shifted. He saw where Keanu was leading him. "Oh, no, no, no," Holloway said, waving a dismissive hand. He let out a forced chuckle, one that carried no real amusement. "You are not going to compare religion to love." "I'm not comparing them," Keanu said, his gaze steady. "I'm asking you, if something can't be scientifically proven, does that mean it has no value?" The audience held their breath. Holloway blinked, momentarily thrown off course. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. But his words carried a weight that filled the studio. "James, you talk about faith as if it's a chain that binds people. But what if, for some, it's a bridge? What if, for me, this cross isn't about control, but about freedom?" Holloway opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu continued before he could interrupt. "You brought up wars, persecution. And you're right, religion has been misused, twisted by those in power to justify harm. But that doesn't erase the fact that for millions, it has also been a refuge. A light in the darkness. I wear this cross not as a statement of superiority or control," Keanu said, his voice calm, "but as a reminder." Holloway's lips pressed into a thin line. Keanu met his gaze directly. "A reminder of humility, of compassion. A reminder that the world does not revolve around me." Silence stretched across the studio. Then Keanu tilted his head slightly. "What about you, James?" Holloway frowned. "What about me?" Keanu's voice remained soft, but the question hit like a hammer. "Do you believe in anything greater than yourself?" The audience grew even quieter. The question landed like a punch. Holloway tensed, just slightly, but enough for the cameras to catch it. He inhaled deeply, composing himself. "We're not here to talk about me." Keanu offered a small, knowing smile. "Maybe we should be." The host's eyes darkened. Keanu leaned back in his chair. Because when someone reacts with such hostility toward a symbol, it usually means there's something about it that unsettles them. Holloway's jaw clenched. For the first time that night, James Holloway was on the defensive. And the audience noticed. The studio was silent. The audience was completely engrossed in the verbal duel playing out before them. James Holloway was uncomfortable. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control of the conversation, and that infuriated him. He took a slow breath, leaning back in his chair in an attempt to regain his composure. But his eyes now carried a sharp, dangerous glint. Losing this debate was not an option. "All right, Keanu." Holloway forced a smile, but there was an undeniable venom in his tone now. "You've spoken eloquently about humility, about compassion, about how the cross represents freedom, not control." Then he leaned forward, his stare cutting. "But tell me this, what about all the people who have suffered under that very symbol? What about those who were judged, condemned, and divided in its name? You wear that cross on your chest, but do you truly understand the weight it carries?" The audience held their breath. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his seat. Instead, a faint smile crossed his lips. "You speak as if the symbol itself is to blame, James." Holloway narrowed his eyes. "Isn't it?" Keanu exhaled slowly, his fingers once again grazing the silver cross. "If one person uses a hammer to build a home and another uses the same hammer to shatter windows, tell me, James, is it the hammer's fault? Or the hands that wield it?" The audience murmured, visibly impressed. Holloway's expression darkened. "That's a convenient metaphor, Keanu," he said, shaking his head. "But we're talking about reality, about history. Christianity, religion, they've been responsible for countless wars, oppression, discrimination. People have suffered in its name." His eyes locked onto Keanu, sharp and unrelenting. "And yet, you sit here wearing that cross like it's just a decoration?" Keanu didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head slightly, studying Holloway. Then, with quiet curiosity, he asked, "James, do you believe in justice?" Holloway frowned. "Of course I do." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "And yet, how many injustices have been committed in the name of justice?" A pause. The audience stirred. Holloway blinked. "What are you getting at?" Keanu's voice remained measured, steady, unwavering. "People have done terrible things in the name of justice," Keanu said calmly. "But that doesn't make justice itself evil. It only proves that even the purest ideals can be corrupted." He let his words settle before continuing. "The same goes for faith." Holloway's jaw tightened. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady and unwavering. "If faith has been used as a weapon, that isn't a failure of faith, it's a failure of the people who misused it. You blame the cross," he continued, "but you ignore the hands that held it." A hushed murmur rippled through the audience. Keanu's words struck like a bolt of lightning. Holloway forced a laugh, but there was a strained edge to it. "So you're saying faith is innocent? That religion bears no responsibility for the harm it has caused?" Keanu shook his head. "I'm saying faith is like fire. It can warm a home or it can burn it down," Keanu continued. "But fire itself isn't good or evil. It all depends on how people choose to use it." Silence stretched between them. Holloway clenched his jaw. He could feel the shift in the room, the tide turning against him. For the first time, he didn't have a sharp comeback. No calculated jab. No rehearsed dismissal. Keanu studied him carefully, then spoke, his voice soft but deliberate. "Maybe the real question isn't about what faith has done." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Maybe the real question is, why does it bother you so much?" A direct hit. The audience stiffened. Holloway's expression faltered, just for a second. "Excuse me?" he snapped. Keanu didn't break eye contact. "You keep attacking faith, James," he said calmly. "But have you ever asked yourself why? Why does the idea of belief make you so uncomfortable?" The studio fell into complete silence. For the first time all night, James Holloway was on the defensive, and the audience noticed. The studio was silent. Not the usual expectant hush, but a dense, charged stillness. It settled in the air, thick and heavy, pressing against the room like an unseen weight. James Holloway, the man who built his career on control, on breaking his guests down with relentless scrutiny, was now the one under pressure. And he hated it. Keanu Reeves had turned the conversation on its head. The audience could feel the shift. Holloway could feel it too. But admitting it? That wasn't an option. He forced a chuckle, adjusted his tie, and leaned back just enough to feign composure. An attempt to reclaim the power slipping through his fingers. "You're clever, Keanu. I'll give you that." His voice remained steady, but his grip on the armrest tightened ever so slightly. "Turning the question back on me. Nice move. But let's not pretend this is about me." Keanu's expression remained unreadable, calm, composed, as if he had all the time in the world. "Isn't it, though?" Holloway scoffed, shaking his head. "I'm not the one sitting here wearing a religious symbol. I'm not the one promoting a belief system in front of millions of people." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Promoting?" Holloway gestured toward the cross resting against Keanu's chest. Call it what you want. But when someone like you, an influential public figure, steps onto a stage wearing something like that, it sends a message. Whether you admit it or not, you're endorsing something. Keanu tilted his head slightly. So if someone wears a rainbow flag, are they endorsing something? The audience stirred. A simple question, yet it carried undeniable weight. Holloway hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Too brief for most to notice, but not brief enough. But Keanu noticed. Holloway quickly regained his composure. Well, he said, voice firm, that's different. A rainbow flag represents inclusivity, equality. Keanu met his gaze, unshaken. And you don't think faith can? His tone was calm, deliberate. The audience leaned in, drawn to the weight of his words. Holloway's jaw tightened slightly. Faith has been used to exclude people, Keanu. To justify hate. You can't deny that. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. And so have governments. So have ideologies. So has science. He let the words settle before continuing. Nearly every belief system in history has been weaponized at some point. Yet we don't erase them entirely. We refine them. We learn. We grow. So why is faith the only thing you believe should be erased? The tension in the room thickened. The audience sensed the shift. James Holloway was losing ground. And for the first time tonight, he knew it. He needed to regain control. All right, Holloway said, leaning forward, his voice edged with urgency. Let's skip the philosophy and get real. His stare sharpened. In today's world, with all the knowledge, all the advancements we've made, do people still need faith? Keanu didn't hesitate. Yes. A simple, firm answer. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Why? Keanu took a slow breath, carefully weighing his response. Because logic alone doesn't fill the human soul. The audience held still, drawn in. His voice remained calm, steady. We live in an age of endless information. We can map the stars, cure diseases, communicate across the world in an instant. Yet people are lonelier than ever, more anxious, more lost. Knowledge answers questions, but it doesn't replace the need for meaning. Holloway leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. So you're saying faith gives people meaning? Keanu nodded. For some, yes. For me, yes. And I believe that's something worth respecting, even if it's not for you. Holloway exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Respecting? That's an interesting choice of words. Because plenty would argue that religion has caused more harm than good. Keanu didn't argue. He acknowledged it. Some would. Holloway's eyes lit up. He sensed an opening. And what would you say to them? Keanu's gaze remained steady, his voice quiet but firm. I'd say pain isn't exclusive to faith. He let the words settle before continuing. Humans are flawed, James. We make mistakes. We corrupt things. But if we only focus on what was done wrong, Keanu continued, his voice steady, we ignore what was done right. The love, the hope, the kindness that faith has inspired. Not from those who twisted it for power, but from those who lived by its true meaning. The studio was silent. Not the forced, expectant kind of silence, but a deep, heavy stillness. For the first time, James Holloway had nothing to say. His lips pressed into a firm line. The moment stretched. The audience could feel it. Holloway was out of angles, out of tactics. The man who had built his career dismantling arguments, leaving guests scrambling for words, now sat across from Keanu Reeves, outmaneuvered. And for the first time, he had no response. The weight of it settled over the studio. A slow realization rippled through the room. This wasn't just an interview anymore. Something had shifted. Keanu remained composed, unmoving, steady, like an anchor in a storm. He didn't gloat. He didn't press further. He simply existed in the moment, unshaken. Then, a sound broke through the silence. A single clap. Then another. And then, the room erupted into applause. The audience rose to their feet, an unexpected standing ovation rippling through the studio. Keanu's words had struck a chord. His unwavering composure, his ability to turn every challenge into a moment of clarity, had left them in awe. James Holloway remained seated, still processing, still reeling. He glanced toward the cameras, already imagining the headlines. He had lost, and there was no denying it. Forcing a thin smile, he fought to reclaim some sense of authority. "Well, Keanu," he said, clearing his throat, "I have to admit, I didn't expect this conversation to take this turn." Keanu met his gaze, calm, steady. There was understanding in his eyes, but no concession. "Conversations have a way of revealing more than we intend, James." Holloway's fingers drummed lightly against the armrest, a nervous tick. He let out a short chuckle, empty of humor. "That they do," he muttered. "I suppose this is the part where I thank you for your insights and your time." Keanu inclined his head, his voice even. "It's been a pleasure." And the way he said it, genuine yet resolute, made it clear. Keanu hadn't sought victory, but it had found him nonetheless. The world was watching. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips from the exchange flooded social media. Keanu Reeves' name dominated the trending lists. Memes, reaction videos, and in-depth breakdowns of the debate spread like wildfire. But this wasn't just another viral moment. It felt bigger. A shift, not just in conversation, but in perception. Meanwhile, James Holloway sat alone in his dressing room, eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding online. The interview was everywhere. News outlets dissected it. Talk shows replayed key moments. Commentators weighed in. Some called it the night Holloway finally met his match. Others called it the most important debate of the year. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through Twitter. Hashtag Keanu wins sat at the top of the trending list. Critics, celebrities, even public figures praised Keanu's calm, unwavering responses. But the worst part? It wasn't just that Keanu had held his ground, it was that Holloway had been exposed. His usual tactics, sharp provocations, calculated condescension, the relentless need to dominate, had failed. And everyone had seen it. For the first time in his career, James Holloway wasn't controlling the conversation. And he hated it. Keanu Reeves left the studio without a word. No victory speech. No gloating. No follow-up interviews. Just a quiet nod to the crew, a few handshakes, and then he was gone. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones raised, voices overlapping. "Keanu, how do you feel about the interview? Do you think Holloway was unfair? What message were you trying to send?" Keanu didn't respond. He simply offered a soft smile, stepped into a waiting car, and disappeared into the night. His silence spoke louder than any words could. Days later, he finally broke that silence with a single post on social media. No statement. No explanations. Just a simple message. Asterisk, we don't have to agree to respect each other. We don't have to believe the same things to walk the same path. Asterisk. The post exploded. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about winning. It was about understanding. And that was why Keanu had won. Because in the end, it wasn't about the debate, it was about the conversation. If you enjoyed this story, there are many more that will inspire and uplift you. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.